A democratic nation can often slip into centralized control while adhering to every single letter of its own law. This vulnerability exists as a core feature written into the state's institutional operating system. When power begins to consolidate, the public typically focuses on the specific politicians in office. They vote to replace the leaders, but often leave the underlying structural flaws that permitted the centralization intact. The physical architecture of the state, like this archival view of the Serbian parliament, remains constant across decades. Yet the machinery inside can be manipulated to concentrate power within these same walls. When constitutional checks fail to restrain executive reach, the result is widespread citizen unrest, a manual attempt to reset a broken system. Protecting the independence of the state requires redesigning its constitutional machinery, moving beyond a reliance on the personal integrity of individual officials. This process is a form of debugging the Constitution, identifying and neutralizing the vulnerabilities that allow for systemic overreach. We will analyze 3 specific structural exploits: first, electoral drag, then judicial bias, and legislative incompetence. Engineering these specific patches creates an institutional architecture designed to obstruct the standard vectors of power consolidation. The first major exploit is electoral drag. This occurs when the popularity of an executive candidate creates a gravitational pull, dragging their entire party into legislative dominance. This bug is triggered when parliamentary and presidential elections occur within the same cycle. Here, a charismatic presidential candidate acts as the list bearer. Ticket splitting is rare. Voters align their legislative choice with the presidential candidate. The winning executive carries their party into a commanding legislative majority, neutralizing parliament's independence. With the legislature captured, the executive gains unilateral influence over the prime minister, the central bank, and regulatory agencies. The mechanical patch for this is decoupling. First, the Constitution must mandate that presidential and parliamentary elections occur on completely separate, non-overlapping schedules. Second, the president must be legally barred from acting as a list-bearer or maintaining political party membership once elected. Decoupling creates a structural firewall, ensuring the legislature remains an independent check on executive authority, regardless of an individual leader's public appeal. The second exploit is judicial bias, often facilitated through direct political appointment. When a politician appoints a judge, the appointment creates an inherent expectation of loyalty to the executive. The institutional patch for this is iterative consensus. Iterative consensus is a multi-stage filtering process. It systematically removes political agency from judicial selection. First, the Supreme Court proposes 15 candidates based on objective metrics. The Legislative Assembly then reduces this pool by 2 candidates. To prevent a dominant majority from controlling selection, a vote to remove a candidate exhausts those voters' power for that round. Independent bodies like the High Judicial Council and Senate continue this reduction until 3 candidates remain. Finally, the president reduces the list to 2. The final selection is then determined by a process of sortition, a completely random draw between the last 2 candidates, breaking any remaining political ties. Because the resulting judge is vetted by every branch but chosen by none, they enter the court with a high degree of structural independence. The final bug is legal rigidity, which frequently stems from legislative incompetence. When laws are vague, they are often interpreted by partisan committees within the legislature, rather than experts in legal application. This creates friction. Rigid, poorly drafted laws frequently fail to account for the complexities of actual human behavior and judicial reality. We address this through a precedent engine. This patch shifts interpretive authority, granting the Supreme Court the exclusive power to clarify vague legal provisions. Experienced judges are best positioned to determine what is justiciable, meaning which provisions can be effectively enforced in a courtroom. When facing an unclear law, the Constitutional Court utilizes the preamble of the Constitution to identify the original intent of the legislature. The Supreme Court then issues a formal precedent, providing a functional instruction for all future legal cases. This functions like a desire path in urban planning, where the natural correction of the users replaces a flawed original design. By formally recognizing these paths, the court allows the legal system to respond to real-world conditions. Shifting interpretation from politicians to the judiciary aims to create a legal code that is more responsive and operationally sound. When these three mechanisms are integrated, the state's institutional center of gravity undergoes a profound shift. The first component, decoupled election timelines, neutralizes electoral drag. Next, the iterative consensus model insulates the judiciary from political loyalty. Finally, the precedent engine allows the legal system to evolve through functional application. This interlocking design aims for a stabilized state apparatus, where power is checked by the structure of the system itself. The cycle of systemic failure often persists because constitutional mechanics offer open pathways for exploitation, regardless of the specific individuals in power. To break this cycle, we must look past the search for charismatic leaders. True independence requires treating the state as an engineering challenge and building a more resilient institutional architecture. A constitution designed with structural integrity is a foundational prerequisite for an enduring democracy.